Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
Sandy adjusted her blouse nervously as she entered the dimly lit bar. It was ladies' night, and the place was bustling with energy. As a transgender woman in her mid-30s, Sandy had grown accustomed to the occasional sideways glance, but tonight she felt particularly self-conscious. It had been months since she'd ventured out to socialize, and the butterflies in her stomach were working overtime. She made her way to the bar, ordered a glass of white wine, and scanned the room. That's when she saw her, a strikingly beautiful middle-aged woman with shoulder-length auburn hair and piercing green eyes. Sandy's breath caught in her throat. The woman bore an uncanny resemblance to her daughter, Carla, albeit a more mature version. As if drawn by an invisible force, Sandy found herself moving towards the woman. Up close, she could see the delicate laugh lines around her eyes and the subtle shimmer of her expertly applied makeup. The woman exuded an air of elegance and femininity that Sandy couldn't help but admire. "Hi there," Sandy said, her voice slightly shaky. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I couldn't help noticing you from across the room. I'm Sandy." The woman turned, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Hello, Sandy. I'm Charlotte. It's a pleasure to meet you." As they began to chat, Sandy felt an immediate connection. There was something about Charlotte's demeanor, a mix of grace and vulnerability, that resonated deeply with her. As the conversation flowed, Sandy found herself opening up about her own journey as a transgender woman. "You know," Sandy began, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass, "I've always felt feminine, even from a very young age. It's like there was this voice inside me, whispering that I was meant to be a girl. But it took me years to fully understand and accept that part of myself." Charlotte nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I can relate to that feeling all too well. It's not an easy road, is it? But look at us now, two beautiful women enjoying a night out." Sandy couldn't help but smile at Charlotte's words. There was a shared understanding between them, an unspoken recognition of the challenges they had both faced and overcome. "Tell me more about your journey, Sandy," Charlotte encouraged, leaning in closer. "I'd love to hear how you got to where you are today." Sandy took a deep breath, memories flooding back. "Well, I was incredibly fortunate to have a supportive mother. She always encouraged my interest in makeup and feminine expression, even when I was just a little boy. I remember one Halloween when I was about 7 years old. I desperately wanted to dress up as Cinderella, and instead of discouraging me, my mom helped me create the most beautiful costume." Charlotte's eyes widened. "That's wonderful, Sandy. Not everyone is lucky enough to have such accepting parents." Sandy nodded, acknowledging the truth in Charlotte's words. "I know. I grew up in a pretty progressive neighborhood, which helped too. There was this transgender woman who lived down the street, Mrs. Thompson. She was always so kind to me, and seeing her live her truth openly really shaped my understanding of gender." As Sandy continued her story, she found herself transported back to her childhood. She described the conflicting emotions of her early years, the joy she felt when playing dress-up with her female cousins, and the growing dread as she approached puberty. "I was terrified of the changes that male puberty would bring," Sandy confessed. "The thought of my voice deepening and body hair growing filled me with anxiety. That's when my mom suggested we look into puberty blockers. It was a big decision, but it gave me the time I needed to explore my gender identity without the pressure of unwanted physical changes." Charlotte listened intently, her eyes shining with empathy. "That must have been such a relief for you. I wish I had had that option when I was younger." Sandy reached out and squeezed Charlotte's hand gently. "It really was. And you know what else made a huge difference? The internet. I know it gets a bad rap sometimes, but for me it was a lifeline. I found online communities of other transgender individuals, learned about hormone therapy and different surgical options, and most importantly, realized I wasn't alone." Charlotte nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, I completely agree. The internet has been a game changer for our community. Can you imagine what it must have been like for transgender people in the past? The isolation they must have felt?" Sandy shuddered at the thought. "I can't even fathom it. Growing up without that support and understanding, it must have been so lonely." A shadow passed over Charlotte's face, and Sandy sensed there was more to her story. "What about you, Charlotte? How did you come to terms with your identity?" Charlotte took a long sip of her drink before responding. "My story is a bit different from yours, Sandy. I didn't have the support system you did. Growing up, I felt like I was living a double life. On the outside, I was the perfect son, excelling in sports, dating girls, doing everything society expected of a young man. But inside, there was this constant turmoil." Sandy listened intently as Charlotte opened up about her past. She described nights spent lying awake, imagining a world where she could be her true self. She spoke of stolen moments, trying on her mother's clothes and makeup in secret, always terrified of being discovered. "I used to create these elaborate fantasies," Charlotte confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd imagine my mother finding me dressed in her clothes, but instead of being angry, she'd be understanding. She'd help me with my makeup, teach me how to walk in heels, tell me I was beautiful. But in reality, I never felt safe enough to share that part of myself with anyone." Sandy's heart ached for the young Charlotte, trapped in a world that didn't understand her. "That must have been so difficult. How did you cope?" Charlotte's eyes lit up as she remembered. "Books, actually. There was this author, Sandy Thomas. No relation to you, I assume?" Sandy shook her head, and Charlotte continued. "She wrote these stories about boys being feminized by their mothers. They weren't exactly high literature, but for me, they were a lifeline. It was the first time I realized there were others out there who felt like I did. It gave me hope." As Charlotte spoke, Sandy found herself marveling at the resilience of the human spirit. Despite facing such different circumstances, they had both found their way to living authentically. "You know," Sandy mused, "we owe so much to the pioneers who came before us, the activists who fought for our rights, the writers who told our stories, the doctors who developed the treatments that allow us to align our bodies with our true selves. We stand on their shoulders." Charlotte nodded solemnly. "Absolutely. And now it's our turn to pay it forward. By living our lives openly and proudly, we're paving the way for the next generation." As the night wore on, Sandy and Charlotte found themselves sharing more intimate details of their lives. They discussed the joys and challenges of their physical transformations, the complex emotions that came with hormone therapy, and the decision they had both made to keep their penises intact. "For me," Sandy explained, "it wasn't about rejecting that part of my body. It was about embracing my whole self, mind, heart, and body. I've come to see my genitals as just another beautiful feminine part of me." Charlotte's eyes shone with understanding. "I feel the same way. It's taken me a long time to get here, but I've learned to love every part of myself, even the parts that society might not understand." As they talked, Sandy felt a warmth spreading through her chest. Here was someone who truly understood her experiences, who had walked a similar path. The connection between them was palpable, charged with mutual understanding and growing attraction. Without thinking, Sandy leaned in and pressed her lips gently against Charlotte's. The sensation of lipstick on lipstick sent a thrill through her body. For a moment, the world around them faded away, and it was just the two of them, two souls finding comfort and acceptance in each other's arms. When they finally pulled apart, Charlotte's eyes were shining with emotion. Without a word, she took Sandy's hand and led her towards the exit. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Sandy felt a sense of excitement and possibility. Whatever came next, she knew that she and Charlotte had found something special, a connection built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the joy of being truly seen. As they walked hand in hand down the moonlit street, Sandy reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the little boy who dreamed of being Cinderella to the confident woman she was today, every step had been necessary. Every struggle, every triumph, every moment of self-discovery had led her here, to a place of self-acceptance and the possibility of love. Charlotte squeezed her hand as if reading her thoughts. "You know, Sandy," she said softly, "I used to think that being transgender meant I'd never find someone who could truly understand me, but meeting you tonight, it's like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." Sandy's heart swelled with emotion. "I feel the same way, Charlotte. It's like we've known each other for years, not just a few hours." As they continued their walk, the conversation flowed easily between them. They shared stories of their first experiences presenting as women in public, the nerve-wracking process of coming out to friends and family, and the small, everyday victories that meant so much. "Do you remember the first time you bought women's clothes for yourself?" Charlotte asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. Sandy laughed, recalling the memory. "Oh, do I ever. I was so nervous I must have circled the department store for an hour before I worked up the courage to go in, and then I panicked and bought the most hideous floral dress you've ever seen, 3 sizes too big." Charlotte's laughter joined hers. "Well, you certainly can't accuse yourself of having boring taste. My first shopping trip was a disaster, too. I tried to squeeze myself into a size 8 dress when I was clearly a 14, nearly popped all the seams trying to get it off in the changing room." As their laughter subsided, a comfortable silence fell between them. Sandy marveled at how easy it felt to be with Charlotte. There was no need to explain or justify herself. For perhaps the first time in her life, she felt completely understood and accepted. They found themselves in a small park, illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. Charlotte led Sandy to a bench overlooking a peaceful pond. As they sat down, Sandy noticed Charlotte's expression grow serious. "Sandy," Charlotte began, her voice soft but steady, "I want you to know how much this evening has meant to me. For so long, I felt like I was living on the fringes of society, never quite fitting in anywhere. But being with you, it's like coming home." Sandy felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "Oh, Charlotte," she whispered, reaching out to cup the other woman's face gently. "I feel exactly the same way. It's like you've seen parts of me that I've kept hidden for so long, and you've accepted them without question." Charlotte leaned into Sandy's touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. When she opened them again, they were filled with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. "I know we've only just met, but I can't help feeling that this is the start of something special. Am I crazy for thinking that?" Sandy shook her head emphatically. "Not at all. I feel it too. It's like the universe brought us together for a reason." As they sat there, the cool night breeze rustling the leaves around them, Sandy felt a sense of peace settle over her. She thought about all the challenges she had faced on her journey, the fear, the self-doubt, the occasional bouts of dysphoria, and realized that every struggle had led her to this moment. "You know," Sandy mused, her fingers intertwined with Charlotte's, "I used to think that being transgender meant I was somehow broken or incomplete. But now I see that it's just another beautiful facet of who I am. It's given me a unique perspective on life, on gender, on what it means to be true to oneself." Charlotte nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "I couldn't agree more. Our experiences have made us who we are, strong, resilient, compassionate. We've had to fight for our right to exist, to be seen and respected. That's not a weakness, it's a superpower." As they continued to talk, Sandy and Charlotte shared their hopes and dreams for the future. They spoke of their desire to be role models for younger transgender individuals, to create spaces where people could feel safe and accepted, and to continue pushing for greater understanding and equality in society. "Sometimes I think about the young boy I used to be," Charlotte said, her voice tinged with a mixture of sadness and fondness. "So scared and confused, feeling like there was no one in the world who could understand. I wish I could go back and tell him that it gets better, that there's a whole community out there waiting to embrace him." Sandy squeezed Charlotte's hand. "We can't change the past, but we can create a better future. By living our lives openly and proudly, we're showing the next generation that it's possible to be happy and successful as a transgender person." As the night grew later, neither woman seemed eager to end their time together. They walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, sharing more stories, laughing at shared experiences, and marveling at the instant connection they had found. Finally, as they approached Charlotte's apartment building, they both realized that their evening was coming to an end. There was a moment of awkward silence, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. "Sandy," Charlotte began, her voice soft but determined, "I don't want this night to end. I know it might seem fast, but would you like to come up for a cup of coffee? Just to talk more, I mean. I'm not ready to say goodbye just yet." Sandy felt her heart skip a beat. The connection she felt with Charlotte was unlike anything she had experienced before, and the thought of extending their time together filled her with joy. "I'd love that, Charlotte," she replied, a warm smile spreading across her face. "I'm not ready for this night to end either." As they made their way up to Charlotte's apartment, Sandy felt a sense of excitement and possibility wash over her. Whatever the future held, she knew that this night had changed her life in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. Inside Charlotte's cozy apartment, they settled on the sofa, cups of steaming coffee in hand. The conversation flowed as easily as it had all evening, touching on everything from their favorite books and movies to their deepest fears and most cherished dreams. As the first light of dawn began to peek through the windows, Sandy and Charlotte found themselves curled up together, emotionally and physically exhausted, but filled with a sense of contentment neither had experienced before. "You know," Sandy murmured, her head resting on Charlotte's shoulder, "I came out tonight hoping to maybe make a new friend or have a nice conversation. I never expected to find someone who understands me so completely." Charlotte pressed a soft kiss to the top of Sandy's head. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? I feel like I've known you my whole life, Sandy, and I can't wait to see where this journey takes us." As they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, both women felt a sense of peace and belonging. They had found in each other not just a potential romantic partner, but a kindred spirit, someone who truly understood the unique joys and challenges of their shared experience. In that moment, all the struggles of their past seemed worth it. Every tear shed, every obstacle overcome had led them to this point, to a place of self-acceptance, mutual understanding, and the promise of a future filled with love and authenticity. As the sun rose on a new day, Sandy and Charlotte slept peacefully, their hearts full of hope, and their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they were no longer alone on their journey. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two souls united by their shared experiences, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to living life on their own terms. The road ahead might not always be easy, but with understanding, compassion, and love, Sandy and Charlotte were ready to face whatever came their way. Their story was just beginning, and the possibilities were as endless as their capacity for self-love and acceptance.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.